Welcome to Best Man Academy. I am Babajide Ojo. If this is your first time here, we talk about admission, funding, and survival tips for a master's or PhD in the United States. Now, what I'm going to do now is give you some ideas on what to do to help, your application, for admission. So one of the things you would have to do if you have a little bit low GPA than, for example, like 2.8, is you absolutely have to blaze whatever exams that are required. The standard exams like TOEFL, or if a GRE is required, then you absolutely have to meet at least the minimum. But I would say you should even exceed the minimum so that you can be, more competitive for admission. So it will require you to, sit tight and prepare very well for those exams. Now, most of the time, the admission committee looks at your application, holistically. So it has a lot of parts. So they don't just look at your GPA to make a decision on admission. So they look at your GPA, your standard scores, your statement of purpose, anything that was required for you to submit is most of the time equally important in the decision they are going to make. So don't be discouraged about a low GPA. In some cases, there are some departments would say maybe do just TOEFL or do just only GRE. If you have a low GPA, I would even say go ahead and do both, so that you can articulate in your statement of purpose, which we will talk about later, that you did this exam so that you can be competitive. You really want this so bad. That's why you took the exams, even though they are not mandatory for you. Now, the second thing that you should look at, and now this is very important, is what we call acceptance rates. Okay? Now, acceptance rates is just a probability that your application will be accepted or rejected. Now, for example, if a university has an acceptance rate of, let's say, 10%, that means as soon as you submit your application, you already have a 90% of rejection, which is really tough. So you want to look at the acceptance rate of that university to see where you stand, if you stand a chance at all for admission. So if your GPA is low, you might want to go for universities that have a little bit high acceptance rate for your application. Now, how do you identify acceptance rates? Now, all you have to do is to just Google. I don't know if this works on mobile, but on a desktop, if you just type in, let me use Harvard University as an example. So if you just type in Harvard University, now you will see a little box on the right side of your screen, and right here you will see acceptance rates. So you can see that the acceptance rate of Harvard is 5%. So if your GPA is very weak, you will definitely not be competitive for this kind of university. Okay, so all you have to do again is to Google the university, and you will see this box, especially if you use a desktop. For a mobile phone, if you are using Chrome, you can set it such that it would display your result in form of a desktop page, and you will still see this box. Now, another example is Cornell. You can see Cornell University, the acceptance rate is 14%. So now, but at this point, I must warn that acceptance rate is not just about the quality of the particular institution. Okay, The quality is a little bit part of the metrics, but it's mostly, a metrics used for the amount of application, that is accepted compared to the total application that they receive most of the time. So it's not about quality only, but because a lot of people apply to these universities, then the rejection rate seems to be, high. Okay, but as well, you can, from this you can, tell or suggest the quality of the university, but most of the time it's not just about quality, so I must mention that. Okay, now if your GPA is low, you might not want to go for these universities, Harvard or Cornell. Again, I must mention that this acceptance rate, most of the time this metric is calculated from undergraduate enrollment and not really graduate, but it gives you an idea of what graduate enrollment would look like as well. So there are a lot of universities that you can apply to in the United States, so you might want to leave these two alone if your GPA is not very high, or if your GPA is high and you did not pass maybe your GRE or your TOEFL very well, you might not want to be wasting your time on this university. Now, I think an example of another university that I've seen folks from this university from conferences. It's a very good university as well, and that's free adverts for them. But you can see that the acceptance rate is 95% here. Now, I'm not saying you should all go to University of Wyoming, but this university will probably stand a better chance of getting accepted in this kind of university if your program is offered, if your course is offered in this university. So again, you can use this acceptance rate metrics to make a decision on where you send in your application. Okay, so that's that. There are a lot of universities in the United States, so you can find that out. And we've discussed how to find universities in the past. So if you have not seen that video, I will link it up here on the left on the upper part of the screen. You'll see that video. Because they don't receive a lot of applications, they tend to have high acceptance rates. If they have to admit people that do not meet the specific requirements, they'll probably offer them provisional admission or put them on probation for maybe the first semester to see how they cope before they make a final decision on admission. So don't be discouraged, give it a try, and you will be surprised what you would discover. And before I forget, I should absolutely mention that even though a department or a university might have a high acceptance rate, that doesn't mean all the departments in that university will be easy to get into. Okay, in most cases there are some departments that have a higher reputation regardless of the general or overall admission or acceptance rates. So some universities are known for a particular field. So some universities are known to be good at a particular field, and most of the time that might not be too reflective on the overall acceptance rate. So just be careful on how you take these numbers. That doesn't mean all the departments in that university will be so easy to get into. I just want to mention that. But just go ahead and give it a try. I know a lot of people here who did some of these things, and they are here studying. Some have even received their degrees and are probably doing the next thing they should do with their lives right now. So Don't be discouraged. Okay? Now, apart from looking at acceptance rates or trying to pass your standard exams, GRE or TOEFL, apart from all those two things, what you can also do, especially if your GPA is very low, I used an example of 2.8, but that's still not too bad. The requirement is 3.0 out of 4 and you have 2.8, still not too bad if you pass your exams very well, or and you try to go to a university that has a high acceptance rate, you might stand a chance. But what happens if your GPA is very low and you are in a field that is very competitive? Now, for example, I encountered someone who has a very low GPA of around 2.0, and he's in the STEM field. The particular dude is in a STEM field, which is, most of the time very competitive. That's, if you don't know what STEM is, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics related fields. So for those kind of fields that are very competitive, if you happen to be there and you have a low GPA, apart from using some of these tips that I've talked about, what you could do as well is to go for a diploma, maybe a 1-year diploma somewhere, to essentially get a certificate that would help boost your GPA. Most of the time the admissions committee look at how well you performed in your most recent on your most recent transcript. So if you have like a diploma, or some people even go for a master's, just to eventually show the admissions committee that you have improved, or you can do well in grad school. So that could also help your application, especially if you're an international student outside the United States. Now, apart from that, another thing that you can probably try is to change fields. If you are in a very competitive field, maybe biochemistry, microbiology, geology, and you have a low GPA, so you might change fields to maybe a related but not as competitive as what you had your undergraduate degree in. Okay, so that could give you a chance of getting in if the department you have chosen is less competitive, or the degree you have chosen is less competitive. Though that's not my favorite, I'm always for going after what you really want to study, no matter how long it takes. But it's just an option. I just want to throw it out there that an option is for you to change fields, and you might stand a chance if you do that. And I've seen people who have done that in the past, and after they changed fields and got a master's in that field, they eventually ended up going back to study what they originally wanted to study, their actual fields. Because like I said, your most recent transcripts would speak better of your ability than very old transcripts. So changing field is an option, and it might just be a longer path to what you eventually want to become in future. Or if you change fields, you might eventually like what you have changed into. Okay, but that's just an option. Now, the last option that I could think of, how to mitigate some of this potential consequence of low GPA, is to apply to universities that are less research intensive. Now, universities that are research intensive will probably be more competitive to get into than those that are less research intensive. So what do I mean by this? Or how do you know which university is less research intensive than others? And when I say university, I actually really mean department, because we've been working at the departmental level right now for some time. So you need to focus on the departments. Are they really research intensive or not so much? And how do you know that? The way I would suggest that you find that out is to see if that particular department offers a PhD program. So most of the time, if a department offers a PhD program, I would categorize them as a research intensive university, okay? Because PhD is all about research, right? But there's a lot of universities that, not universities, or there are a lot of departments that do not offer a PhD degree, okay? So they don't offer a PhD, maybe they only offer a master's program. That makes them less research intensive, because master's is just 1.5 to 2 years and you're done. Now if you get into a less research intensive university for your master's, if you are interested in a PhD and you do well in that particular master's program, you can then move up to a more research intensive university where you can get your PhD. So again, that's another option. However, I must say at this point that if you are looking for funding, most of the funding will be in more research intensive universities, okay? But it's not impossible. You just have to give it a try. There are tons of universities in the United States, so just search and I'm sure you will find your spot. So that's it for today. To summarize, I mentioned that if you think you have a low GPA, you have to establish how low it is by using the GPA calculator to convert it to the 4.0 scale in the United States. Then we talked about preparing very well for your exams, for any exams that are required. Make sure you pass them very well. And also another option is to look at acceptance rates and try to go for a university that has a little bit high acceptance rate. And also you can try to change fields before you now eventually get to your field of interest in future. And another option is to go to a less research intensive university for a start. Those are the realistic options that you can attempt to pursue if you have a low GPA. It's definitely not the end of the world if you do have a low GPA. So that will be all for today. In my next series of videos, I think we will jump right into funding module. Okay, so we'll start talking about funding tips and how you can set yourself up for taking advantage of all the funding mechanisms that are here in the United States for your master's or PhD. So if you don't want to miss that, subscribe, like this video, share it with your friends and families who might find this useful for them. Before I go, I just want to mention that for the next 1 or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the maximum, I might not be able to upload new videos because I'm trying to make a transition from this PhD life to the next step in my career. And during that transition, it might be difficult to shoot videos or edit along the way. But I'll be back in like 2 weeks to upload new videos for you. So what you should do is to start working on what you have right now. Start making a list of universities and start doing all the things we've talked about under the admission module. There is a lot of things to do. Don't worry about funding right now. Worry about where you want to go and what you want to do for now. So when the funding tips come, you know how to plug it into whatever you have right now. So get to work and don't be bothered too much about funding at the moment. So this is Best Man, and I'm signing out for this week. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you all, and I'll see you in the next video.